Uh, Everything is impulse driven. It's whatever Donald Trump wakes up and decides he wants to do. His cabinet scurries around and tries to respond to it. Now, in reality, what happened? I think that we thought we had an opportunity inside Iran to really disrupt the regime, even bring it down.
So what could possibly push the Middle East to the absolute brink? Well, according to a really intense analysis by retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, that fuse might have already been lit. He paints this pretty chilling picture that starts with a secret operation in Iran that goes wrong, and it ends with a high-stakes nuclear gamble.
Right out of the gate, the whole analysis boils down to this one really stark warning: a one-way ticket to Armageddon. I mean, that's a huge claim, right? So you have to ask, what specific chain of events does he think could lead to something so catastrophic?
What you're seeing is another manifestation of the absence of any real strategic planning, thinking, preparation before execution. Everything is impulse driven. It's whatever Donald Trump wakes up and decides he wants to do. His cabinet scurries around and tries to respond to it. Now, in reality, what happened? I think that we thought we had an opportunity inside Iran to really disrupt the regime, even bring it down. This, of course, was based on the protests that are really a consequence of a terrible economic situation and the dramatic reduction in value of the rial, the Iranian currency. Now, a lot of us have wondered why Iran has not gone to BRICS or to the Chinese or someone and said, look, lend me $1 billion, because they could do that easily. That would boost the economy and help the situation tremendously. But for some reason, they haven't done that. Now, I know there's Islamic law that essentially forbids usury. This is one of the reasons the banks in the Islamic world tend to be very solid as opposed to ours. I don't know if that's the justification for it, but the bottom line is that what you started with were very legitimate protests about the economic conditions in Iran. Those overlapped with a struggle, political struggle, between reformers and conservatives. This then was developed into a CIA, Mossad, MI6 operation with the introduction of thousands of these Starlight terminals, enormous quantities of money, which in that setting, of course, is going to buy a certain amount of support. And now we have all sorts of evidence that's being provided overseas as well as here at home for instructions given to people in the crowds to fire on the police and provoke the police to shoot back at them in the hopes that people would be killed. And this then would worsen the situation. Well, all of this unfolded, and it failed.
So, according to Macgregor, this whole crisis didn't kick off with some big, loud event. Nope. He says the first piece of the puzzle, the thing that set everything in motion, was actually a failed covert op inside Iran, an attempt, he claims, to try and knock over the government from the inside out. The analysis claims that it all started with something real, legitimate protests. You had people in Iran who were genuinely upset about the terrible economy. But he says outside intelligence agencies saw this and thought, aha, this is our golden moment. They saw it as the perfect chance to jump in and pour fuel on the fire. And Macgregor lays out what he believes was a multi-stage plan. First, he says, the idea was to co-opt the protests. Then, smuggle in thousands of those Starlight satellite terminals for communication. Step 3, flood the area with cash. And finally, use provocateurs to make sure things turned violent against the police, all in the hope that it would spark a full-blown revolution. But here's the absolute kicker in his analysis. It didn't work. The whole thing, this really elaborate plan, it just completely failed. The revolution they were hoping for never happened. The government didn't collapse. From his perspective, the operation was a total bust.
It failed for a whole variety of reasons. The failure began, I would argue, last week on Friday when the Iranians and the Turks cooperated to annihilate 400 Kurdish fighters who were trying to move from Syria into Iran. I don't think the Mossad or the CIA anticipated that, but I think that's a very important development. There's a growing appreciation in Turkey for the criticality of stability and unity in Iran. The two states, for different reasons, have been competitors and sometimes enemies over 1,000 years, but both are civilizational states. We need to understand that. Americans don't have any idea what that means. Iran is Persia. the Persian Empire has been with us for 2,500, 2,600 years. They have a unique civilization and culture. So do the Turks, for very similar reasons. The Turks came out of Central Asia. They're not Arabs. Anyway, the point is that both of these states are not going to help us or the Israelis destroy one or the other, because they see their survival as civilizational states at risk. So what's happened is that the Starlight terminals were largely picked up, confiscated. The Chinese assisted technically helping to suppress and jam these things and the satellite connections. I think the Russians have helped in whatever way they could, but the point is, I think President Trump was told that this was a golden moment in time, which would allow him with very little effort to topple the government. That failed miserably. Secondly, once it became clear that failed, I can't prove this, but I suspect the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane, probably told him, if we're going to do this, we're going to need more firepower, because what we anticipated has not happened. In other words, the country is not imploding. Its armed forces are intact. Its integrated air and missile defenses are intact, and so forth. And I think at that point, stories were spun out to explain why now suddenly the attack was off. And remember, President Trump tried to persuade people, well, they've stopped killing, and I told them I didn't want them to kill. Give us a break. There's no evidence that Trump gives a damn about who lives or dies in the Middle East, least of all Iran.
So what could possibly push the Middle East to the absolute brink? Well, according to a really intense analysis by retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, that fuse might have already been lit. He paints this pretty chilling picture that starts with a secret operation in Iran that goes wrong, and it ends with a high-stakes nuclear gamble. So what we're going to do is break down his argument step by step and see exactly how he gets from point A to point B. And right out of the gate, the whole analysis boils down to this one really stark warning: a one-way ticket to Armageddon. I mean, that's a huge claim, right? So you have to ask, what specific chain of events does he think could lead to something so catastrophic? Okay, let's trace his logic right from the start.
So, according to Macgregor, this whole crisis didn't kick off with some big, loud event. Nope. He says the first piece of the puzzle, the thing that set everything in motion, was actually a failed covert op inside Iran, an attempt, he claims, to try and knock over the government from the inside out.
The analysis claims that it all started with something real, legitimate protests. You had people in Iran who were genuinely upset about the terrible economy. But he says outside intelligence agencies saw this and thought, aha, this is our golden moment. They saw it as the perfect chance to jump in and pour fuel on the fire. And Macgregor lays out what he believes was a multi-stage plan. First, he says, the idea was to co-opt the protests. Then, smuggle in thousands of those Starlight satellite terminals for communication. Step 3, flood the area with cash. And finally, use provocateurs to make sure things turned violent against the police, all in the hope that it would spark a full-blown revolution. But here's the absolute kicker in his analysis. It didn't work. The whole thing, this really elaborate plan, it just completely failed. The revolution they were hoping for never happened. The government didn't collapse. From his perspective, the operation was a total bust.
So why did it fall flat? Well, the analysis points to 3 big geopolitical shifts that he says the planners just didn't see coming. First off, you had Turkey and Iran, who are usually rivals, suddenly working together militarily. Then you have China stepping in with the tech to jam all those satellite links. And finally, Russia provided intelligence and advisors. So basically, this new alliance popped up and made the whole operation pretty much useless.
And the Russians are very, very concerned about their southern flank because of Central Asia. They want a stable partner in Iran. Iran, if it were to become destabilized, or worse yet, divided or fragmented into smaller states, could prove to be an enormous problem for the Russians. They want good relations because they also want Iran to be part of BRICS and this thing we call the One Belt, One Road project. And we've already seen trains arrive from China in Iran carrying various goods. So Iran is a critical member of the what I would call the China, Russia, India, Iranian quadrangle, if you will. All of these states are linked in one way or another. So we're looking at a real potential in the region for Armageddon, which I suppose there are some deranged people that welcome that on the belief of that some has some sort of religious payoff, but for the rest of us, it's insane.
Right.
And we should try and stop it to the extent that we can. But here's the problem: as I was reviewing this man Witkoff, the real estate guru or whatever that is friends with Trump, who runs around with Kushner making deals and pocketing huge quantities of money, at the same time theoretically representing us. And he communicated these demands to Iran. He said, stop enriching uranium, reduce missile stockpiles, reduce approximately 2,000 kilograms of enriched uranium material to 60%, and stop supporting quote unquote regional proxies. That means anybody that Israel doesn't like.
Right.
In return, we'll lift sanctions. Well, that's just it's they can't comply with that. You might as well say the same thing to the Russians. We keep making demands of the Russians, now making demands of Iran that they won't meet because they're sovereign states. And the more that you threaten, the more persuaded they are that they desperately need to build up their military capacity. So it looks like a dead end, and I think we're going to see this war break out probably in 7 to 10 days.
Okay, so with that covert plan in ruins, Macgregor argues that the strategy didn't just stop. Oh no, it escalated. He claims the focus shifted away from trying to cause a revolution from the inside to a much, much more dangerous and direct option. And that's what he calls Israel's nuclear gamble. And this is where the analysis takes a really serious turn. It raises a pretty alarming question. Is it even possible that Israel is preparing to use nuclear weapons? Now, to back this up, the source points to a couple of, well, let's just say very strange reported events that he sees as clues. So check out the sequence of events he lays out as suspicious. First, there's a public announcement that Israel is going to have an earthquake drill. Okay. But then, a little while later, a really short, kind of odd earthquake is reported, and guess where? Right near the Dimona nuclear site. For Macgregor, that timing is just too perfect. He speculates this wasn't an earthquake at all, but a cleverly disguised underground nuclear test. And just to put that alleged threat into perspective, the analysis estimates that Israel has an undeclared arsenal of somewhere around 300 nuclear warheads. Think about that. We're not talking about a small deterrent here. That's a massive capability that completely changes the whole military calculus in the region. And it's not just about having the warheads. It's about being able to deliver them. The source points to a classic nuclear triad. They've got the ability to launch from the sea using those Dolphin-class submarines. They can launch from the ground with missiles. And of course, they can launch from the air with their F-15 and F-35 jets. They've got all the bases covered.
Israel is in a win or lose everything situation. So if Israel embarks on this war with Iran, the leadership of Iran, the state of Iran, must be destroyed. If it's not destroyed, Israel will be destroyed. I mean, this is the view from Netanyahu and the people that support him. So this is a one-way ticket to Armageddon. So, whatever happens, unless miraculously, as you point out, everything changes, which I don't expect to happen in Iran, this will end up being the destruction of Israel. Now, here we are, and we have pledged our life, treasure, blood, everything to defend Israel to the bitter end. Well, what does that mean? How far are we willing to go?
Right.
Are we willing to engage in a nuclear exchange on behalf of Israel? Well, right now, I would say President Trump would do whatever he's told by Netanyahu and his donors. I just read the other day something about Ron Lauder, this billionaire whose mother or grandmother, I guess, was thrown out of Vienna, Austria, back when the Nazis took over, and she had a perfume business. She came to the United States and made it into $1 billion perfume industry. Supposedly, he is the one who planted the idea of annexing Greenland with the president. So we know who the president listens to. He listens to his billionaire friends and buddies, who all happen to be Zionists. Mm-hmm. So my great concern is that instead of acting like the president of the United States, he'll act like the president of Israel.
Now, a really key point in Macgregor's analysis is that none of this is happening in a vacuum. He argues the whole geopolitical landscape has shifted under our feet. There's this new web of alliances that's formed, and it makes any kind of military move incredibly complicated.
And this really breaks down why, according to the source, these big global players have a direct stake in Iran's stability. For Turkey, he says, it's seen as critical for their own survival. For China, well, it's all about oil and their massive Belt and Road project. And for Russia, it's about keeping their southern flank stable. The point is, each one has a really powerful, self-interested reason to make sure Iran doesn't fall apart.
And this new dynamic, it isn't just some unspoken understanding. The analysis brings up this quote, reportedly from Turkish President Erdogan, aimed right at Israel. "We know what you have, and we're not afraid." The source suggests this isn't just talk either, that it's backed by a long-standing promise from Pakistan to give Turkey a nuke if they ever needed one.
So that brings us to the mindset, the psychology behind all this. According to Macgregor's framing, for the key players in Israel, this isn't just about policy or regional influence. No, it's seen as something much more primal. It's a zero-sum game, a fight for survival. What the analysis describes here are two sides that both seem to believe they're fighting for their very existence. From the Israeli perspective, as presented in the source, the thinking is the state of Iran has to be destroyed. If it's not, we'll be destroyed. It's a win or lose everything situation. And on the Iranian side, the view is we have to build up our military to protect ourselves from these exact kinds of threats. In that kind of mindset, there's just no room for compromise.
So what happens when you have two sides who both believe they're in a fight to the death, and both are armed with unimaginable power? Well, the analysis argues that if this thing actually ignites, there's no way it's going to be contained. It could set off a global chain reaction.
The source is really clear on this. Any attack wouldn't be the end of the war. It would be the beginning of a much bigger one. For one thing, Iran is just massive. It's the size of Western Europe with over 90 million people. You can't just conquer that. And a nuclear strike, he argues it could totally backfire, just unifying all of their enemies against them. And maybe most importantly, the analysis is dead serious when it says Russia and China are not bluffing. They will get involved.
And that really brings us to the final and most provocative question this whole analysis leaves you with. If, as the source claims, the U.S. would offer unconditional support to Israel, what happens next?